Hello and welcome. It's always a pleasure to have you here for another deep journey into the hidden chapters of human history. Today, we're going to explore something truly fascinating, something that shaped science, philosophy, and even politics in ways most people never realize. Before we begin, I'd like to know, where are you listening from right now and what time is it there? Share it in the comments below because I always love seeing the incredible mix of places where these stories are heard. Now, let's start this journey. The Brotherhood of the Invisible College. Even the name feels strange, doesn't it? It sounds mysterious, almost fictional, yet it was very real. It was never a university you could walk into, never a school with walls or towers, but it influenced the entire direction of human thought during one of the most turbulent periods in history. This secretive network began to take shape in the early 17th century, during a time when Europe was caught between old beliefs and new discoveries, between religious control and the rising power of reason. The name Invisible College first appeared in the 1640s in letters exchanged between scholars who wanted to share ideas freely at a time when speaking too boldly could cost you your life. The world they lived in was dominated by the shadow of the Inquisition and by rulers who saw knowledge as something to be controlled, not shared. Questioning official doctrine was dangerous. Books were burned. People disappeared. So if you wanted to explore new ideas about nature, the stars, or even the human body, you needed a way to speak without drawing the wrath of church or crown. The Invisible College was born from that need. But this was more than a study group. It was a brotherhood in every sense. Its members believed knowledge was sacred, almost divine, but not in the way priests taught. They believed nature was a hidden text, written by the hand of something higher, and that man's duty was to read that text, to unlock its secrets. This belief drove them to experiment, to observe, to test everything that tradition claimed to know. In a way, they were rebels. But they were careful rebels. They wrapped their ideas in symbols, in metaphors, in layers of meaning, because open defiance meant death. Many historians trace the roots of the Invisible College to the Rosicrucian manifestos that appeared in the early 1600s. These strange documents spoke of a secret fraternity devoted to wisdom, healing, and spiritual enlightenment. They promised a new age of knowledge, free from ignorance and superstition. Whether those manifestos were a call to action or a clever hoax, they inspired a generation of seekers. Among them were men who would later gather under the banner of the Invisible College. They shared more than curiosity. They shared a sense of mission. They believed humanity stood at the edge of a great transformation, and they wanted to be its architects. Their meetings were discreet. No grand halls, no banners, just quiet gatherings in private homes, often at night, candles burning low, voices hushed, pages of handwritten notes passed from hand to hand. They spoke in codes, using phrases like sons of the fire and guardians of the light. Even the term college was a mask. It gave the impression of harmless scholarship while hiding the fact that this was a network of minds plotting nothing less than a revolution of thought. They were alchemists and astronomers, philosophers and physicians, men who believed the world was far stranger and more beautiful than the doctrines of their day allowed. One of their core principles was the idea of universal knowledge, the belief that all truths were connected, that the same laws governed the stars and the soul. This is why many of them studied alchemy, not as a crude attempt to turn lead into gold, but as a spiritual science. To them, the transformation of metals was a symbol for the transformation of man, from ignorance to illumination. They searched for the philosopher's stone, not because they craved wealth, but because they believed it represented perfect wisdom, the key to harmonizing matter and spirit. Some of these men would later become founders of the Royal Society, which is often celebrated as the birthplace of modern science. But the Invisible College was the soil in which that seed grew. Without its quiet, hidden work, the scientific revolution might have unfolded very differently, or not at all. Members like Robert Boyle, often called the father of modern chemistry, moved between these worlds with caution. In public, they spoke the language of reason. In private, they still whispered about mysteries, symbols, and forces that science would one day dismiss as superstition. The college had no official creed, but its members shared certain values: secrecy, humility, and service to truth. They pledged to keep silent about the identities of their brothers, to protect the work from enemies who would twist it for power. They saw knowledge as dangerous in the wrong hands, yet too sacred to remain locked away. That tension shaped everything they did. It made them cautious, but it also made them determined. They believed history was watching, and that their labor would one day light a fire that no darkness could extinguish. But their secrecy also bred suspicion. In a time of political upheaval and religious wars, any hidden group was seen as a threat. Rumors spread. Some claimed the Invisible College was plotting to overthrow kings. Others accused them of sorcery, of making pacts with dark forces. In truth, their only crime was thinking freely. But in that age, free thought was the most dangerous crime of all. What's remarkable is how much of their spirit survives today. Every time you open a science book, every time you trust an experiment over a dogma, you are living in the world they dreamed of, a world where questions are not punished but pursued. Yet the price they paid is easy to forget. Some of them lost everything. Some vanished into prisons. Some were burned alive, their last breath carrying secrets they had no time to share. And here's something most people never know. The Invisible College never fully disappeared. Its name faded, but the idea lived on in other circles. Societies that blended science with mysticism, reason with ritual. From the Rosicrucians to the Freemasons, echoes of that old brotherhood can be traced, like faint fingerprints on the glass of history. They left clues in symbols carved on buildings, in obscure references hidden in books, in mottos like nullius in verba, take nobody's word for it, which became the creed of the Royal Society. These men believed that truth belongs to those who seek it, not to those who claim to own it. And that belief, born in secret rooms, lit by flickering candles, changed the destiny of the human race. Yet the question lingers: why did they choose secrecy? Why hide what could have enlightened the world? The answer is simple and tragic: because light was dangerous in a world built on shadows. The secrecy of the Invisible College wasn't just about survival, it was also about philosophy. These men believed that wisdom should be earned, not handed to the unprepared. They feared that careless minds would misuse discoveries for power or destruction. This wasn't paranoia, it was experience. The world they lived in was brutal. Wars of religion raged across Europe. Science could be branded heresy. Printing the wrong book could bring a death sentence. So they built layers of protection, codes, allegories, symbolic language. A simple letter about flowers blooming in winter could actually describe an experiment in chemistry. A casual reference to the stone might conceal years of work in natural philosophy. To outsiders, it was nonsense. To those initiated, it was a map. Some historians believe the Invisible College grew out of older traditions, tracing back to the medieval guilds of alchemists and the Hermetic schools of the Renaissance. These traditions revered secrecy as a sacred duty. Knowledge was seen as fire. It could warm or burn, illuminate or destroy. This belief shaped the Invisible College's entire approach. They favored slow progress, careful initiation, and an almost monastic discipline in their studies. They saw themselves as guardians not just of facts, but of something larger, the idea that truth must be protected from tyranny and ignorance. The men who joined this network were not common scholars. Many were nobles, physicians, theologians, even courtiers with influence at the highest levels of power. They moved in silence through courts and councils, hiding their radical ideas behind masks of loyalty. Some were suspected of ties to the Rosicrucian movement, which spoke of a universal reformation of the whole wide world. This phrase terrified rulers and priests because it hinted at revolution, not just political, but spiritual and intellectual. And in a way, it was true. These men were laying the foundations of a world where authority would no longer dictate truth, where reason would challenge dogma, where nature itself would become the ultimate scripture. But secrecy has a cost. The very tools that protected them also bred myths. Whispers spread that the invisible college was summoning spirits, that they trafficked in forbidden arts, that their experiments were a mask for sorcery. Pamphlets accused them of working with the devil, of plotting the collapse of Christendom. Even learned men like René Descartes were rumored to have links to the Brotherhood. Whether those rumors were true or not, they reveal the climate of suspicion in which these seekers worked. The college never had a fixed headquarters, but London became its beating heart. In the chaos of the English Civil War, when old certainties were crumbling, the invisible college thrived in the shadows. Among its members were men like Robert Boyle, whose work on gases would change chemistry forever, and Samuel Hartlib, a visionary who dreamed of universal education. They met in hidden rooms, sharing manuscripts that might have cost them their lives if discovered. Over time, these gatherings grew bolder, and in 1660, after years of secrecy, a new institution emerged, the Royal Society of London. To the public, it was a scientific body dedicated to improving natural knowledge. To those who knew the history, it was the invisible college stepping into the light at last. The motto of the Royal Society was telling, "Novellis in verba," take nobody's word for it. This was a direct challenge to the old order, where truth flowed downward from throne and altar. It declared that observation, not authority, would rule. This principle, born in secret meetings by candlelight, would ignite the modern scientific age. But here's something most textbooks don't tell you. Even as these men championed reason, they carried with them the symbols and whispers of their mystical past. Boyle still wrote about alchemy. Isaac Newton, one of the greatest minds of the age, filled notebooks with arcane formulas, searching for hidden codes in scripture. These men straddled two worlds, the age of magic and the dawn of science, and for a time those worlds were one. But the story doesn't end there. The ideals of the invisible college rippled outward, touching other secret networks that shaped history. The Freemasons adopted similar principles of brotherhood, secrecy, and the pursuit of enlightenment. Some believe Rosicrucian influence flowed directly into Masonic lodges, embedding symbols that survive to this day: the all-seeing eye, the blazing star, the unfinished pyramid, all echoes of a dream born in the shadows of the 17th century. Even the political revolutions of the 18th century bear the fingerprints of these hidden traditions. The call for liberty, reason, and progress didn't spring from nowhere. It was nurtured in circles where men dared to ask forbidden questions, where they learned to trust their own minds over decrees from pulpits and thrones. The invisible college may never have drawn a sword, but its ideas were more powerful than armies. They broke the chains of dogma and opened the door to a world where inquiry could flourish. Yet, there is a mystery that lingers. Did the invisible college truly vanish when the Royal Society was born? Or did some of its members keep the deeper secrets hidden, passing them down through other orders, guarded by oaths and symbols that only the initiated could read? Some researchers argue that fragments of this brotherhood survive even now, disguised in philanthropic societies, academic networks, even global think tanks. Whether that's fact or speculation, one thing is certain: the dream of an invisible college, a network of minds united by the pursuit of truth, did not die. It may never die, because every generation produces seekers who refuse to accept the limits imposed on thought. What began as whispers in secret rooms became the roar of modern science. But behind that triumph is a story of risk, courage, and quiet defiance. a story written not in public squares, but in hidden chambers where men placed knowledge above fear. That is the legacy of the Invisible College, and whether its brothers still walk among us or only in history, their influence is everywhere, in the technology you use, the medicine you trust, the very way you understand the universe. The question now is this: what knowledge today is hidden, waiting for its own invisible college to bring it into the light? When you think of the Invisible College, you might picture a small group of scholars with quills and manuscripts, debating in quiet rooms. That image is true, but only partly. These men were more than intellectuals. They were initiates into a tradition that saw knowledge as sacred. To them, learning was not just an academic pursuit, it was a spiritual path. This idea was rooted in Hermeticism, a philosophy that taught that all wisdom came from a single divine source, and that the visible world was a reflection of invisible truths. The phrase, "as above, so below," wasn't just poetry for them. It was the key to understanding the unity of the cosmos. Because of this belief, their meetings sometimes felt more like rituals than discussions. Candles were lit not only for light, but as symbols of illumination. Discussions of planetary movements might segue into meditations on harmony and proportion. Experiments were framed as acts of reverence, as if revealing the secrets of nature was a form of prayer. The Invisible College stood at a crossroads where science and mysticism met, a crossroads that later history tried to erase, painting the scientific revolution as pure reason when, in truth, it grew out of a soil rich with myth and symbol. The members of this brotherhood often communicated through emblems and allegories. One of their favorite symbols was the rose cross, a flower joined with a crucifix, signifying the union of beauty and sacrifice, nature and spirit. This emblem linked them to the Rosicrucian manifestos that had electrified Europe just a generation earlier. In those texts, readers were promised hidden knowledge, healing arts, and the coming of a great renewal. Whether the Rosicrucians were real or imagined, their vision became the heartbeat of many secret circles, including the Invisible College. Recruitment into such a network was never public. It happened quietly through conversations, shared texts, subtle tests of curiosity. A well-placed question, a passing remark about the harmony of the spheres, could open a door or close it forever. Those deemed ready were invited to gatherings, where they were bound by oaths of discretion. The language of these oaths often echoed older initiatory traditions, speaking of fidelity, secrecy, and the service of truth. Breaking such an oath was not just a betrayal, it was a spiritual failure, a fall from the path of illumination. This culture of secrecy gave the Invisible College both strength and fragility. It allowed them to survive in hostile times, but it also made them vulnerable to suspicion and myth. Rumors multiplied. Some said they possessed the Philosopher's Stone and could turn lead to gold. Others claimed they trafficked with spirits or sought to overthrow monarchs. These stories were false, but they carried a kernel of truth. The college did aim to transform the world, but not through violence or sorcery. Their revolution was subtler. They sought to reorder the very way humanity understood reality. And here's the irony. While they dreamed of universal enlightenment, they worked through exclusivity. They believed truth had to be revealed slowly to minds prepared for its weight. In this, they resembled the mystery schools of the ancient world, Eleusis, Alexandria, where sacred knowledge was veiled in symbols and unveiled only through initiation. The Invisible College was a modern echo of those ancient sanctuaries, but with a new mission: to unite mystical vision with empirical inquiry, to marry the poetry of Hermeticism with the rigor of observation. Over time, this fusion began to fracture. As science gained authority, the mystical dimension faded from public view. The Royal Society presented itself as sober, rational, empirical, yet its early meetings were haunted by the ghosts of alchemy and magic. Isaac Newton, its most celebrated member, devoted more words to alchemical studies than to mathematics. His search for universal laws was as much a spiritual quest as a scientific one. He believed nature was a cipher, concealing divine architecture, a belief straight from the invisible college. The influence of the college extended beyond science. Its members corresponded with statesmen, merchants, even spies. Knowledge was power, and those who held it could shape trade, diplomacy, and war. Some letters hint at networks stretching across Europe, linking like-minded circles in France, Germany, Italy. In this sense, the Invisible College was more than an English phenomenon. It was part of a continental web of seekers, a hidden republic of letters bound by a shared dream that reason and revelation, science and spirit could converge in a single vision of truth. But history had other plans. The Enlightenment hardened into materialism. The mystical threads were cut or driven underground. Some fled into Freemasonry, which adopted symbols and rites that echoed Rosicrucian and Hermetic motifs. Others found refuge in esoteric societies that flourished in the 18th century. Groups like the Order of the Golden and Rosicrucians, and later, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. These orders claimed a lineage reaching back to the Invisible College, keeping alive the belief that behind the facade of ordinary history runs a hidden stream of wisdom, guarded by those who understand its power. Even today, whispers persist. Some researchers point to certain think tanks, elite academies, and global networks of influence, suggesting that the old dream of an invisible college never died. Perhaps it simply adapted, trading alchemical symbols for digital codes, candlelit chambers for encrypted servers. If the goal was the pursuit of hidden knowledge, the tools have changed, but the impulse remains. And this raises a question worth pondering. Do we still need an invisible college? In an age where knowledge floods every screen, where secrets are exposed with a click, what place is there for hidden brotherhoods? Perhaps the answer lies in something Jung once observed, that humanity resists its own depths. Information is everywhere, but wisdom remains rare, and so long as that remains true, there will always be those who gather in quiet places, whether physical or virtual, to seek what cannot be shouted in the marketplace. The Brotherhood of the Invisible College may belong to history, but its story is a mirror. It reflects our hunger for truth, our fear of power, and the eternal tension between light and shadow. And that perhaps is the real secret. The most powerful societies are not those that hide knowledge, but those that remind us to look for it in the first place. Thank you for staying with me on this journey. Before you go, share your thoughts below. Do you believe groups like this still exist today? And if they do, what do you think they're working on now? Your perspective might surprise us all. To truly understand the Invisible College, we need to go back even further, before the 1600s, to the Renaissance, an era when Europe rediscovered the wisdom of antiquity. Hidden in the libraries of monasteries and palaces were texts that had survived the fall of empires. Works of Plato, Pythagoras, Hermetic writings from Egypt, and mystical commentaries from the East. These were not simply philosophical ideas. They were maps of the universe, suggesting that the cosmos was a living organism governed by patterns and laws. For centuries, such ideas had been suppressed or forgotten under rigid dogmas. But as printing spread, whispers of them returned, igniting minds hungry for a larger vision. The Invisible College was the heir to this Renaissance current, but with a new urgency. The old world was breaking apart. The 30 Years' War had turned Europe into a graveyard. Superstition strangled progress. In this darkness, the college believed knowledge could become a torch, not for one nation, but for all humanity. Yet the torch had to be shielded, for light was dangerous to those who ruled by shadow. So they borrowed strategies from older initiatory schools: concealment through symbols, secrecy through brotherhood, and transformation through discipline. Their initiation rituals were simple but profound. A candidate might be given a text filled with allegories and asked to interpret its meaning. Success wasn't about memorizing. It was about awakening insight. The language was symbolic because truth, in their view, could not be handed down like a rule. It had to unfold within. This was not elitism for its own sake. It was protection against misuse, against corruption, against those who would twist knowledge for power. They believed knowledge without virtue was a weapon, and history, they warned, was full of such weapons. The college's emblematic ties to Rosicrucianism are well documented. The Rosicrucian manifestos spoke of a fraternity devoted to reforming science, philosophy, and religion. They promised a new dawn, a harmony between reason and faith, a world where hidden wisdom would heal division. Many historians now think these manifestos were aspirational, even utopian. But they did something remarkable. They sparked networks of seekers who felt the same hunger. The Invisible College was one answer to that call, a living experiment in building a fellowship of enlightened minds. From this experiment grew the Royal Society, but something important happened in that transition. The mystical language faded, the empirical language rose. Publicly, the new institution spoke only of experiments and observations. Privately, some members still whispered of alchemy, prophecy, and the Prisca Theologia, the ancient theology believed to run like a golden thread through all wisdom traditions. Newton himself, often celebrated as the father of modern science, spent more time decoding biblical prophecy and alchemical symbols than writing his Principia. To him, these were not separate pursuits, they were parts of a single quest. But history edited that quest, carving science out of its mystical cradle and leaving the rest to the shadows. As science marched forward, the esoteric impulse sought other homes. Freemasonry absorbed much of this symbolic heritage, adopting tools and metaphors that echoed the Invisible College's ideals: the builder's square for reason, the compass for balance, the unfinished temple for the work of human progress. Through lodges, these ideas spread across Europe and the New World, shaping the minds of revolutionaries and reformers. From the drafting of constitutions to the founding of modern republics, Masonic influence was everywhere, and behind that influence lay currents that trace back through Rosicrucians to the Invisible College itself. But the story does not end in the 18th century. In the 19th, new esoteric orders arose, claiming descent from this lineage: the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the Theosophical Society, and others that blended mysticism with the language of evolution and psychology. Their rituals still spoke of light and darkness, of veils and initiations, echoing the old dream that there is knowledge beyond the reach of dogma, a wisdom that must be sought, not imposed. And today, the name Invisible College reappears in unexpected places, in think tanks, in scientific networks, even in intelligence communities. Some use it metaphorically to describe the informal webs of researchers who share ideas across borders. Others suggest something more, a continuity of influence, subtle but real, guiding the course of science, culture, and even geopolitics from behind the scenes. Is this true? Hard evidence is scarce, but the persistence of the idea tells us something profound, that the dream of a hidden fellowship, working for a future beyond the reach of ignorance, has never died. What makes this story compelling is not conspiracy, it's continuity. Across centuries, in monasteries and laboratories, in lodges and libraries, small circles of minds have carried a single torch: the belief that truth is worth guarding even at great risk, and that humanity can rise if it dares to know. That belief shaped the modern world in ways too vast to measure. And whether or not the Invisible College still exists in any formal sense, its spirit lingers. In every quiet collaboration, in every act of intellectual courage, in every refusal to bow to dogma. Perhaps that is the real secret. The Invisible College was never just a society, it was an idea. That knowledge belongs to no throne, no altar, no single voice, but to those who seek it with humility and resolve. That idea cannot be burned, it cannot be silenced, It passes from hand to hand, mind to mind, like an unbroken flame. And maybe, without even knowing it, you are part of it too. Thank you for staying until the end of this journey. If this story sparks something in you, share your thoughts below. Do you think hidden networks still shape the world today? Or has the dream of the invisible college become something greater, an open pursuit that now belongs to all of us?